Here's a quick disclaimer. You're about to watch a video when I review this really scuzzy Nazi propagandist. And he's so bad at it and so outrageous at it that the grown-up words get used. So the following video is not appropriate for little ears. All right. So I'm going to take a look at a video that this is a Monk on Demand video. We're doing a quick review. This is really a cold review. I've only watched like 2 minutes of this video. Somebody on my video on my Bible study at my men's Bible study this morning asked me what I thought about it. So we'll jump right in. I'll make sure that the transcript is available here. So. First thing I'd like to do when I get asked to do a video is my degree's in English, and so communication is very much something I've studied. I want to know who's right, who's talking, and to whom. So thought I'd look at Anonymous American, which right again doesn't send good vibes to me, honestly. People who are saying, unless you're part of an oppressive system, why do you got to hide? Unless you're saying something you know is wrong, is my general take. So take a look at his Twitter profile here, and we've got a superior man thinks only of virtue, common man thinks only of comfort. That is, of course, a Confucius quote, but superior man and then the Iron Cross. So the gentleman who asked me to review this is from Europe. Here in America, the Iron Cross has a bad taste after World War II. It's not something you're really going to see unless somebody's trying to be countercultural. It's just too strongly linked with the Nazi Party. Now, part of my family originally immigrated from Germany. I understand that the Iron Cross is a medal of is a award for valor that far predates the rise of the Third Reich. But when you see an American with an Iron Cross symbol, you don't get the benefit of the doubt, right? That's a red flag number one. And I was looking around and I said, okay, well, maybe I can find out what this guy's doing on Twitter. I look at Twitter and his account is expended for violating the rules. Red flag number two. So I'm going to go into this as a skeptic. And I'm going to go into this as a skeptic specifically because I don't have any reason to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. And then when I looked really quick to skim the comments, what are you using for audio narration? And Dinkus replies, I use MinMax Audio's AI to narrate my essays to maintain anonymity, to speak fairly at topics that have linked to my identity, could potentially compromise aspects of my personal life. In other words, what I'm going to say, if you understood, is either so vile or so reprehensible that either nobody would hire me, or depending on where you are, because I don't have any real identification of this guy. So I don't know if Gizer is part of America or if it's a Canadian or an Australian. I just know that they want their anonymous profile to look American, which starting off kind of scummy, man. This is not great, but let's dig into it. And I'm gonna juggle my preview over here. Not that interested in all of his nope. I'm not really all that interested in his visuals, but I'm very much interested in his words. So we'll take a look at that.
The economic calamities that marked the early 20th century, the Great Depression, the rise of hyperinflation, and the widespread desolation of unemployment, forced a reckoning with the very foundations of the Western economic order.
Okay, so I call bullshit right away. You're talking about the late 20s, late 30s, so you've already skipped you've already skipped late industrialization in Western civilization. You're coming in kind of at the mid peak of nationalism and weapons proliferations treaties. You're just going to trounce past World War One because World War One and its consequences might be a complication for you. And the wording is so dramatic. Actually, it's melodramatic. And what I noticed in the little bit I've already heard, I want you to listen. See if the narrator gives any specifics because I haven't heard any. So what you're getting fed is not an analysis of historical facts. What you're getting fed is a narrative. It's very useful to be aware I'm being manipulated because this isn't an appeal to your intellect where you would be giving details like you would in an actual history class, or a professional setting or a professional lecture. You're getting broad. You're getting talking points. And he's leading off with talking points, and his talking points are so childish they sound like they come out of a comic book, right? This is not political speech or a comic book, and I hold those both to be about the same. Yeah.
For decades, liberal capitalism had been treated not as a system among others, but as a kind of secular orthodoxy.
By whom? In which country? You're talking about. No, no details.
Beyond reproach. When that house of cards collapsed, it gave rise to a
Sorry for the blasphemy. It's just it's so cheesy. Who wrote this? Are they 12?
fundamental questioning across Europe and the United States. What exactly had we built?
When the Roaring Twenties, the expansion and growing prosperity of 1910 at the turn of the 20th century. So 1900, your average person in Western society lived on like lived on an annual income. All right, let's do this. So, average annual income USA year 1900. Prices and wages by decade 1900. Oh, too much detail. Frick. All right. History of American income. 1820, early 20th century. Average American worker earned about $12.98 per week for about 60 hours a week, or 600 and under $700 a year. Okay. Um but compared to that to 10 decades earlier, where the average American earned, or 45% of the population, 55% of the population earned less than 500 by 1890. This isn't a collapse of a house of cards. 1919, worker salaries increased 750 a year, right? In the 20s, averages increased to 1,236 a year. So if we're doing a graph, this graph is just going up. So I'm going to lecture you about history. Just skipped 20 years of ever increasing prosperity despite the Spanish flu and despite World War II, and World War One. And so the Great Depression, 1930s, but 30 years into the decade. Uh, right. So as somebody who's relatively familiar with American history, I've just given you an idea of what American wages were doing.
And on what ground did it stand? In many nations, disillusioned populations turned to radical alternatives. Communist parties found fertile ground among the impoverished and disaffected.
Okay. So communism was viewed, but why were they impoverished and disaffected? The only reason that you've stated was this house of cards of the liberal order. I find it interesting that you've skipped over a worldwide plague that killed over 30 million people, and World War One, which killed just under the. From what I understand, World War One killed roughly as many people as the Spanish flu, or a little less than the Spanish flu. But you're not going to attribute any of that to the devastation of war in Europe, or the devast, or of the first real serious industrialized world war. You're gonna skip over the Great Plague of the start of the 20th century. You, okay, I don't have to take you seriously, and we're not even a minute in, and I already don't take you seriously. You're a hack propagandist at that.
Yet communism was not the only contender that emerged from the wreckage.
Now, did you hear? So remember, communism, radical, right? So we're gonna, since we know he's not doing history, now let's gonna listen. Let's start listening for what talking points he's got, right? So disillusioned population, radical alternatives, communism. So if we were doing bullet points in a literary analysis class, those would be my bullet points.
The United States responded with the New Deal, rooted in the economic theories of John Maynard Keynes, calling for the state to assume greater responsibility in managing economic cycles through government spending and strategic intervention.
I like how that's supposed to be non-Marxist, though that's 100% of the theory behind it. And you're going to skip the fact that many modern economists and historians say the Great New Deal caused the Depression in America to last 2 times as long as it did in Europe. So dragged out poverty and suffering as opposed to helping.
It was an approach designed to preserve the liberal system, but not to transcend it. The machinery of capital remained intact. It was simply greased with public funds.
The machinery of capital? The fuck is this? This is what a joke. This is so bad. Oh, machinery of capital. What you mean people can invest and people can own property? That capital? Yeah, so the America didn't go full ownership of the proletariat, or you could say, or the full nationalization of industry, a la fascism. Machinery of capital. I'm gonna be at
And
wow.
administrative oversight. It soothed symptoms, but left the underlying disorder untouched.
Underlying disorder of what? You haven't mentioned it. Okay, so remember, don't ask narrator for facts because he's not going to give you any. Just swallow the pill that there was great underlying disorder. Nations are always in a state of change, bro. I don't know how to break this to you, but for for goodness sakes. Oh, this is so bad. This is so cheesy and it's so stupid.
On the European continent, particularly in Central Europe, a far more decisive vision took shape.
Oh, I love do you hear the tone, the change in the vocabulary, right? Underlying chaos, radical alternatives of communism, underlying chaos of machinery. Now, but compare, now what color is our words? Decisive vision. You neo-Nazi piece of shit. Seriously. Uh, this is such a hack job. I I I enjoy laughing my way through this. I can't take this seriously. This guy, if anonymous worm, whoever did this, has graduated high school or is over the age of 18, he has to be embarrassed. He should be ashamed of himself. No wonder he has to hide his identity. Who wrote this?
It was there that fascist regimes sought
Oh, the decisive vision. What fascist regimes rose?
to free their nations from the tyranny of international finance and
Fascist regimes rose to free the people from tyranny. They wore spandex and their capes glowed in the dark. Yeah, your bias is showing. I love how all the black and white photos of all the dirt and the crime, right? They're not showing you Carnegie Mellon Hall or symphonies that are being held in the 1920s or or the roaring New York, the roaring 20s, or the expansion of railroad system, the availability of electricity, the proliferation of indoor plumbing, the massive rise in the massive drop in child mortality rates as medicine starts just clinging on to hygiene, the invention of the Red Cross. No, 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 no. We had to skip right ahead to the and can't even the valiant shit. What is this? Oh, just the decisive vision of the fascist regimes to free their nations from the tyranny of international finance and the chaos of unrestrained markets.
And the
Oh,
chaos of
jeez.
unrestrained markets. They rightly perceive the instability of entrusting national prosperity to distant financial institutions.
You can't trust you can't trust financial to the you can't trust prosperity to the financial institutions. I mean, they only continue to exist as long as the people they invest in make a profit. Otherwise, they lose money. Of course, I'm still in fifth grade. I don't shave every day yet, and I haven't learned that businesses have to make money by providing goods and services that improve the lives of others. No, nobody's ever taught me that yet. Jeez.
Speculators who owed no loyalty to people or place.
Yes. Dang, I need to make a neo-Nazi bingo card, right? So Volkenland is a very German idea. It's not something going to hear. You're not going to hear it from an American, ever. Even if we're going to talk about the national prosperity, etc. We don't do people in place. Was this written in German? Maybe this was written in German and translated to English because Volkenland doesn't have a direct English. That's a real Germanic concept. I'm starting to really doubt that anonymous American, trust me, bro, is a native English speaker. He's admitted to having AI do his narration. So current theory is that we're in Germany and we would be arrested if we were caught out. Not we're an American who doesn't want to get banned from ever attending college ever. Working theory.
They
Working
abandoned the
theory.
constraints of the gold standard and wrested control of their monetary systems back from foreign banks.
Oh, that sounds like the back cover of an action movie. Oh man, lay it on thicker, bro. Lay it on thicker. You're being too subtle. Check out the words. They wrested control from the monastery back from the foreign banks. Those dastardly people who would make their money by investing in businesses that would turn a profit. The fiends! Oh, this moron. Oh, it's so bad. Who talks like this?
The goal was not profit, but sovereignty.
Their noble goal of their decisive vision was sovereignty.
While history remembers these regimes with disdain and sometimes even horror,
Oh, history remembers them with disdain and horror. It isn't that they were disgusting or horrific. No, it's simply the oppressive label foisted upon the decisive nobility of fascism. But I mean, now he's not going to come out and say by the Jews, but you can almost hear it. The international banking conspiracy shackles of the gold standard. So this guy, oh, you suck so bad. You're not even good at this.
it is telling that the only system to survive the Second World War intact was the liberal one, which soon came to dominate not only economically, but ideologically.
Um, the only one? Have you studied the rise of Marxist unionism in the United Kingdom after World War II? Uh, and all of Europe, actually? Uh, I mean, you until the Gulag Archipelago was published, even American universities were touting it. Detroit was built specifically to pattern after the Soviet model city, which is one reason why it now looks like somebody dropped a nuke on it. As it failed, just as communism always fails. So we've skipped the prosperity of the 50s. We've skipped the 60s. We've skipped the international liberal economic order that America did. Okay, so here's what Dinkus here does not understand. After World War II, America looked around, and the great threat was Russia. But Russia was thousands of miles away and had millions of soldiers. We did not have the logistical capacity to go fight them in Europe. So we made a financial alliance with the rest of the free world that we would help fund we would help fund their reconstruction efforts with massive loans and grants that turned out to be basically gifts. Because World War II was so devastating, America was kind of the only industrialized economy left standing, which is why its prosperity, not necessarily that I'm a fan of the American system as an American, but it wasn't that we had some magic formula. Our formula worked. But it was also, we were the only ones standing. We were the only source of so many industrialized goods for so long. There simply wasn't any competition we're talking about. So, basically the deal was we'll give you a lot of money and we will build a navy to keep trade safe in the free world. And in return, you will follow our military policy and unite with us against the expansion of communism. All of that. He skipped all of that. He wants, because again, this is a deceitful human being hiding his identity, already been kicked off of Twitter for violating the rules, which you got work to do. Man, I've been trying for years with the gospel. I still haven't been booted off Twitter. So you've really got to be into some serious, nasty, racist crap, really, to be still banned under Elon Musk's Twitter. You got to be a pretty vile human being. And you got to hide your identity, or else you're never going to work again in the United States if that's where you live, or if you live in Germany and you caught secretly spreading Nazi propaganda. Ooh, yeah, you go to prison from what I understand for that crap. So I get why you're hiding in mommy's basement like a worm, but you are not. It's bad. All right, so Mr. Divorced from Facts propaganda machine is going to keep going, and he wants to go to the next emotional manipulation point, right? He doesn't want to, he's not giving you an overview of history. If he was giving you an overview of history, he would have done the NATO expansion in the 1940s and 50s. He would have talked about he would have talked about, he might have addressed the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which was like a 700 years, and it started all of in the discovery of oil in the Middle East. These things which have like almost a century long repercussions. Lawrence of Olivier, what? Nope, nothing. Decolonization in Africa, skip it. No big deal, because it's only about what he can manipulate you to embrace his message. I right now we're still in the manipulation, like, oh, you must agree with me that we're all drowning. Here I will get, and I'm assuming later on we're going to get the, here I have a bold solution, we too can do the, oh, what were those pathetic words, have the decisive vision of fascism to liberate ourselves from banks. It's like, oh, jeez. So I have this feeling that pitch is coming, and Schlock Boy here is just gonna keep spooning it on from emotional manipulation. And remember, only the fascists got color pictures of nobility and order. Everyone else is be black and white pictures so far, and always grunge and poverty. The emotion of manipulation is dialed up to 11. And if he wasn't so crappy at it, he might actually succeed.
In the post-war years, the United States and its allies experienced an era of material affluence unrivaled in human history.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, this golden age was not a fruit of moral strength.
Are you sure? Are you sure? Let's talk about the morals. The freedom of the individual to profit from their own labor, which incentivize people to better their lives. The increased availability of education. You in the 1900s, you're still talking about make your mark, and people being able to be illiterate to the point where the high school education was taken for granted by the 1950s, and college was the distinctive mark before the Vietnam War. these aren't virtues. The vast reduction of the vast reduction of policy, the booming of international trade under the Pax Americana because of the strength of the American Navy, the resolution of America to stand against Soviet expansion in the Vietnam War, in the Korean War. None of these count for you, huh? Though none of those are moral. Um, at this time, this is a picture from the 1950s or early 60s. Most black people were from an intact family, and the black income was rising at a rate faster than white income. Most white Americans were also seeing a steady rise in income. One man was able to provide for four, five, six people off of his singular wages. The rise of luxury goods and the comfort involved, the expansion of hygiene, medical research. No, none of these are moral benefits because they're not fascism.
Or spiritual restoration. It was a borrowed time, purchased with debt and distraction.
Prove it. You won't. You can't. You don't know anything.
By the late 1960s and into the 70s, the cracks beneath the polished surface began to widen.
Oh, if I cared more, I'd do a image search of when this is. It's looking like the 60s from that guy's dress, which means this is probably. Oh no. So there's the Washington Monument. This is a demonstration on the National Mall where it's illegal to build permanent buildings. And this deceitful, lying piece of filth is trying to pretend that he's showing you an actual shanty town. It takes, you forgot to Photoshop out the evidence that you're committing fraud, liar.
Keynesian theory, once hailed as a marvel, no longer delivered. Inflation and economic stagnation returned.
Why? With the proliferation of Marxist union deals that drove Detroit underground. And then we had President Carter and his economic policies against oil and against the environment. Which was when I was a kid. It was a bad time, but it was a bad time because we elected Marxists. We're going to skip that part, right? Because you have to be against America if you're going to push an idea other than America, which I'm sure you are. I am so sure you are.
More profoundly, the culture itself had begun to rupture.
The culture was going to rupture? The civil rights movement? Right? That's a rupture of the culture when we're when we're doing away with the evils of segregation and racial prejudice. Yeah, tell me you're a Nazi without telling me you're a Nazi, bro.
The same decades that saw the unraveling of economic consensus also witnessed the disintegration of moral and social order.
The moral and social order. Is that what segregation is, you racist prick?
What began as economic instability gave way to civilizational crisis.
It's the end of civilization if we can't be racist in public.
The revolutionary upheaval of that era, often described in political or sociological terms, was at its core a spiritual revolt.
There was a lot of godless atheism going on in the late 60s and early 70s, I'll grant you. But a spiritual revolt against what? You gonna say? From what? To what end? You gonna say? No?
It was not merely a reaction to Vietnam or segregation or gender roles. It was the final unshackling of the West from any remaining trace of its Christian heritage.
You putz! I grew up right after this period. Most Americans, 80% of Americans were still claiming church affiliation. You lying worm. You dog.
Authority was despised, tradition was mocked. And so, the liberal order, already hollowed out economic.
See, actual Christians. This is the crowd gathered to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Focus on the family, the American traditional church. We celebrate this day. It was a revolt against Christianity. So here's one of the things that the neo-Nazis have twisted from scripture that has nothing to do with reality here in America is they equate racism with Christianity. So if you're not racist, you can't really be a Christian, you know. And so the equal right, the civil rights movement with its with equal rights and judging people by the content of their character, that's what they're talking about because that's what he's showing. He's not showing us. He's not showing us cities being burned down or he's showing us the most famous and well-respected speech in 20 years before or after it as the rebellion against
economically
Christianity.
began to rot from within. While anti-capitalist agitation exploded onto the streets in the revolutionary fervor of '68, something deeper than economic discontent was unfolding. The baby boomers, raised in post-war affluence, immersed from childhood in television and media, and newly aware of global injustice,
Newly aware of global injustice. Right. Nobody knew anything about poverty or slavery or racism when in the 1800 in the 1700s or the late 1800s when the American Navy and the British Navy and the French Navy and were giving their lives to end the international slave trade. We didn't know about injustice then. It was only the boomers who discovered it. Who knew? This putz.
erupted into history as the first fully mediated generation. But their revolt was not only against poverty or war, it was against the moral
Now we're back to the 1950s with the forced integration of the public school system. So, oops, time skip.
order itself. What we witnessed was not a class uprising, but a cultural insurrection. In the universities, this unrest coincided with a profound metamorphosis within the intellectual left.
Really? Because the intellectual left had been openly praising communism for decades before then, but okay, buddy.
Traditional Marxist doctrine, once revered as near scripture by radicals, was now being questioned, even discarded. Marx's dialectical materialism had long prophesied that capitalism's internal contradictions would eventually give rise to a proletarian revolution.
Okay, he was wrong about everything. Big deal.
But by the late 20th century, it was becoming clear that this revolution was not coming.
Yeah, because somebody escaped the Soviet system and published the Gulag Archipelago. His name was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Got to skip that fact too, huh?
The working class had been absorbed into consumer culture. The
Working class had been absorbed as somebody who called communism. So his other personality at the start of this video called communism radical. Now he's using Marxist talking points. Which face do you? How many faces you got? How many masks are you gonna wear in this mess?
industrial laborer had become a middle-class homeowner. More
Oh, did you hear that, guys? And here's what makes America great and what makes Western civilization great. Marx was wrong because the free market economy was able to take the working class and raise them to the bourgeoisie. They were elevated into the middle class through the freedom that he called an illusion full of cracks and lies and financed by debt and other bullshit talking points. this this is so incoherent. It's not. I'm sorry. It is funny. It's hilarious. This guy wants to be taken seriously in public, and I can't stop laughing. This is like watching a brain put through this. This is intellectual spaghetti with like with like neo-Nazi arsenic sauce. This is amazingly bad.
than that, Marx himself had been a child of the Enlightenment, shaped by its assumptions, historical progress, material determinism, the primacy of reason. The emerging generation of leftist thinkers, steeped in the language of postmodernism and post-structuralism, ejected those modernist assumptions wholesale.
You used big words. Now the fact that you're completely divorced from reality will be ignored by the people who are really impressed by the big words.
history, class, even objective truth itself were all now called into question. In their place arose a new kind of radicalism.
Oh yeah, this is very popular with the white nationalists, right? Viking, so the rise of Nazism did this too, where um, Dr. Jordan Peterson, famed clinical psychiatrist, claimed clinical psychologist who did a lot of research on the rise of evil and the rise of Nazism. He pointed out that the emotion that allows people to commit crimes against humanity is not anger, it's disgust. So it is revulsion, right? Gag reflex. Disgust allows you, unlocks your ability to do terrible, terrible crimes, and so people will focus on minority issues that they are pretty sure you will feel disgusted at in order to in order to get to manipulate you to do whatever they want, because it's such a powerful motivation. So he's going to go great straight to gay liberation because best knowledge without the propaganda of warping our kids. Two, 1.5, 2% of the population is gay, and most of the rest of the population finds homosexual activity to be repugnant, whether they're going to admit it or not. And of course, that's there's such a programming propaganda thing going on right now in America. Those numbers are turning because the constant pounding of the message. But when you're doing a propaganda piece and you want to manipulate somebody to join you in evil, that you have to hide your identity if you ever want to participate in society again, like Anonymous American, he knows he's doing wrong, or he wouldn't have to hide his identity, right? So now, cue the appeal to disgust, and once he can get you disgusted enough, then I think we're going to pivot to his prescriptions for solutions.
One no longer grounded in economics or class conflict, but in identity, power, and above all,
Right? Like, there's plenty of less salacious, less outraging images you could use, but we're going for the ones to make the audience go because that's the emotional response that will allow you to be manipulated.
all desire. At the center of this shift was a curious fusion of Marxism and psychoanalysis. Jewish intellectuals,
Here we go. It took 5 minutes and 20 seconds before we got to the fault of the Jews.
particularly those orbiting the Frankfurt School, sought to blend Freud's psychology with the left's revolutionary agenda. Wilhelm Reich was among the most extreme.
Wilhelm Reich. Died in 1957. So he's talking about the late 70s. He's giving you pictures from the mid to late 70s. Again, changed back to black and white whenever possible, so that you will subconsciously associate the color images in color and respectable looking with his approach, and images that are and images that images he wants you to accept or feel associate with will be done with respectable images that he wants you to feel angry or disgusted by will be given in these grainy black and white. And he's talking as if this is something that's happening sequentially, but he's jumping back in time 40 years out of sequence. So he's shuffling cards and playing games with reality to manipulate his audience because he's a slime ball. He's not giving you an overall thing. And it's time for him to get the native. I thought he'd be better at it. I thought he would build up more disgust before he pivoted to hating the Jews and other anti-Semitic vile pieces of crap. But nope, he's pathetic, and so he only gave you like 10 seconds or 15 seconds before he went to hitting the Jews. He really should have given you like 2 minutes at least if he was going to do this right. But he's as shitty at this as he is evil.
In the mass psychology of fascism, Reich advanced the theory that fascism arose not from economic forces, but from sexual repression.
Oh, So Reich was criticizing fascism, which is what you really want to spread, you Nazi screwball. That was what he was going to do. That's what he's really after. And you have to defend fascism by pointing out it was the evil Jews who were criticizing fascism. You suck eggs. This is so bad.
The strict moral codes, traditional family structures, and Christian norms
Ah, 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 ah. See what I said, right? He when you're hearing the change in language, and suddenly he's going to beautiful color images to make it, but it's a jump immediately from fascism, right? Because he's not going to give you a differentiation. He wants you to think fascism has moral codes, right? Um, and he wants you to think, he wants you to think fascism is associated with Christianity, which is another joke. If you've studied what the Third Reich planned to do to the Christians as soon as they were done with the Jews, he wants you to think of this neoclassical stuff constructed in the 19th century had something to do with fascism in the early to mid 20th century, because he's a manipulative propagandist piece of junk.
of pre-war Europe had, he claimed, created psychic pressure that erupted into authoritarianism. The solution? Early exposure to sex and masturbation.
I'm done. No, okay, I'll keep going. Oh, no. What are we all Catholic? Because, quote, hyper conservative, to quote, hyper conservative Christian psychologist Dr. James Dobson. 96% of males admit to masturbating. The other 4% have been known to lie. But that's supposed to be, and we're back to the evil Jewish conspiracy, right? So he's going to get pictures in grainy black and white. He's going to have them huddled together. Sly looks over to the side.
Only sexual liberation could immunize the masses against fascism.
Okay, so this guy was stupid, because that's not what fascism is about. But he's got to find a Jewish conspiracy theory to justify whatever hate's coming next.
This idea, once fringe, was soon echoed in the American Academy due to his connections and ability to network with other influential Jews in academia.
Oh, the Jewish conspiracy is now out. Okay, I've proven my point. This little shit is historically ignorant, and he's peddling conspiracy theories. I have better things to do with my time, but you've heard it. The completionist part of me wants to keep going. But there's only so long I can suffer this. I'm gonna change the playback speed, because I have a finite amount of life, and he's not worth more. He's not worth much more of it. Um, so we've got some anonymous little worm hiding in mommy's basement, already kicked off Twitter, peddling Jewish conspiracy theories, shuffling around historical facts with pseudo talking points to praise fascist regimes. If you were wondering about this video, I think I've proved my point. But hey, it could get worse. Not only does he suck at this, but he could get more evil in public.
Frankfurt School theorist Herbert Marcuse took Freud's concept of repression and reoriented it toward political liberation. In Eros and Civilization, Marcuse rejected Freud's tragic vision that
1956. So once again, we've jumped backwards 20 years to prove cause and effect where it doesn't exist.
civilization requires the permanent suppression of the instincts. Instead, Marcuse envisioned a society where the basic drives of man, especially the sexual, could be expressed freely. The true revolution, he argued, was not material, but libidinal.
Okay, so this is pre-sexual revolution satanic stuff. Big deal, has nothing to do with the American economy.
Industrial society was imprisoning the soul through false needs, consumerism, and
Consumerism. What is your argument? Oh
moral
gosh.
constraint. Real freedom would only come through the total dissolution of repression, the breakdown of the family, and a new relation between man, nature, and his instincts.
Herbert Marcuse, Eros and Civilization, Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Oh my gosh, the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research is still yeah, okay, so somebody's still teaching this stuff because it's an excuse. It's claiming if we live like Sodom and Gomorrah, we'll be free till the nuke drops. Okay, fine. I don't
In place
care.
of the old left's vision of labor and capital, the new left offered a gospel of personal liberation, subjective experience, and sensual transgression.
Personal liberation, right? So there's the Nazi spin again. Yes, you're part of the Jewish conspiracy if you want to be free. Achtung, stop with the freedom.
The structures that once ordered society, family, tradition, religion,
The tradition. The beer maidens. I gotta. This is so hilarious. Oh.
even reason, were redefined as tools of domination. Liberation meant their destruction. And thus, what began as economic protest became a spiritual war.
All right, so there's more. There's more going for the disgust, right? Because we're re-revving, we're spinning back up that disgust feeling. So he's gonna make another push for something else
Marcuse's
wrong.
goal, ultimately, was to transform radical politics from a struggle for fair labor conditions or resistance to capitalist exploitation into a struggle to liberate the individual's basest instincts.
Okay, so
The
this is postmodernism, and it's evil, and it's straight. It's a lie from the pit of hell. Doesn't justify fascism.
libido, Marcuse believed, must be unshackled from the chains of culture, tradition,
Oh, enough with the sexual obsession, you pervert.
and reason. His colleague in the Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, another Jewish intellectual, followed similar lines of thought.
Also dead by the 70s. This musicologist and social. Oh, he's not even a psychologist. You're gonna skip that because you want to push your Jewish conspiracy. I okay, Jewish conspiracy, Jewish conspiracy. Wow. What? Oh, so that looks like Franco's fascism. So let's go back.
Adorno and others went so far as to claim that traditional family structures bred authoritarianism.
Okay, well, at least he's got Franco's. Or is that the Spanish Revolution?
The influence of the Frankfurt School, particularly Marcuse, upon the New Left cannot be overstated.
I don't disagree that the absolute godlessness of the of the anti-Christian sexual revolution was rooted in Marcuse. I'm gonna laugh at the the Jewish conspiracy theory is just pathetic.
Marx, Mao, and Marcuse.
Oh. All right. On the Jewish question is a response by Karl Marx to then current debates over the Jewish question. Marx's father converted to Lutheran Christianity. His wife and children were baptized. Marx wrote a piece in 1944 under the title Der Judenfrage. All right. Right. So Marx would have agreed with your Nazi, but he hated. He was an anti-Semitic Jew hater. But no, it's actually a secret conspiracy. They're all the same. Pay no attention to the facts.
Before the decade ended, Marcuse had become the unofficial intellectual patron of the movement. His reach extended far beyond student radicals. In
Nothing of this has got to do with capitalism, you schmuck. Hey, let me look down to the bottom. How the left became capitalism's secret weapon. You are not talking about capitalism, and you're citing a bunch of people who are the enemies of capitalism because they were avowed postmodern Marxists as if they were the agents of capitalism. Because the anti-capitalists are secretly the agents of capitalism because I haven't defined capitalism, haven't really shown that it was bad in any way. I'm covering the period in which capitalism began to wipe out world poverty, but trust me, it's the evil Jews.
69, Pope Paul VI denounced Marcuse by name, alongside Freud, blaming them for what he called the disgusting and unbridled manifestations of eroticism that defined the sexual revolution. This condemnation was later labeled as anti-Semitic, as if you had not guessed already.
Okay, so the Anti-Defamation League is a group in America that is predominantly hardcore leftist, and anything that isn't hardcore leftist, they call anti-Semitic. That doesn't mean that real anti-Semitism, like worms hiding in mommy's basement using AIs to hide their identity while lying about history and shuffling dates around like cards in a street tender trying to rip people off, aren't actually anti-Semitic. You racist jerk.
Marcuse was also Jewish. The condemnation
Dun dun dun. Hughes was also Jewish. Oh my gosh, ow!
was not limited.
I mean, you want to play this game? You want to go through every count of rape and slaughter and butchery and torture done by the Germans?
To the Catholic Church. The Soviet Union's Pravda called Marcuse a false prophet, and the apartheid.
Okay, so even the Marxists didn't like the guy. He was, however much he liked Marxism, he was associated with stuff that even the Soviet Union didn't do. But that doesn't make him an instrument of capitalism. Oh no, one Marxist disapproves of another Marxist. What would that be called? I don't know. Ask Trotsky.
Regime in South Africa banned all of his books. Yet only in the liberal West, most notably the United States, was Marcuse hailed as a visionary.
Okay, let's start differentiating terms because there's a difference here in America. We've had to start using a distinction between liberal, as in all mankind should be free, which is one of the founding ideas of America, and leftist. And he's going to start mixing those terms at exactly the time in America where they stopped meaning the same thing. Because the people who are marching were for, right, their sympathies in the Vietnam War or for the communists conquering South Vietnam. Okay. When the Khmer Rouge happened in Cambodia, they were for Pol Pot. These are not people who want freedom of the individual anymore. These are people who want power, and they're willing to use sinful sexual desire to seize power. And Anonymous Worm is going to deliberately start confusing terms because he's out to manipulate you.
The American intelligentsia embraced his radicalism as liberation, and any resistance to his social teachings was quickly labeled as anti-Semitic hatred as.
It doesn't matter what the ADL says is anti-Semitism, because the ADL says anything other than open Marxism is anti-Semitism, as we've covered.
Similarly, the National.
This is a great bit of propaganda. This is great. The first celebrity sex therapist had to flee the Nazis, right? So he wants you to, again, this is a Nazi propaganda film. He wants you to see that the Nazis were standing up against the evil sex therapists in their and pro-gay. Now, were there some really terrible ideas going on in the postmodernist Western thought? Yeah, there really are. Most of my studies in Europe are based out of France, where the postmodernists were actually like pushing pedophilia and the normalization of pedophilia. So I get it. They were evil, but that doesn't make the Nazis good. This is not, this is why I don't think this person has graduated from high school or he's trying to manipulate junior high kids. Because This isn't a children's game where only one person is it. This is not a game of tag. This is not a game of hide and seek where only one person is it. You can have two bad guys in a room. You don't believe me? Go to a jail, go to a prison. You'll find more than two bad guys in every cell. But this guy's so stupid, or he thinks that you're so stupid, he wants you to believe that because the Nazis were against this, and what he's going to skip is during the earliest stages of Hitler's earliest stages, Hitler allied with open homosexuals during the Brown Shirts period. If you read The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich, they'll cover this. Read The Hidden Hitler. They'll cover this. Historians have covered until they gained power and had power secure, the Nazis allied themselves with the gay left. Allied themselves with German homosexuals as long as they weren't Jewish. I can start. It would take me 10 minutes, and I could pause this, take 10 minutes, and come back. I'm not wasting more time. There's known homosexuals acting in Nazi party. Now, as soon as the Nazis didn't need all the allies they could get, they killed them. But he's pushing a propaganda point that is a lie. The Nazis were in the early stages of the Nazi party. They were more than willing to work with homosexuals in order to rise to power, and then they were willing to kill them. So this idea, the fascists, they had the boldness to be virtuous. No, they didn't. They have no morals.
Socialists in Germany first went after the sexologists. For example, Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld, who was a pioneer in studying human sexuality, gender identity, and advocating for LGBTQ+ rights. Hirschfeld founded the Institute for Sexual Science in Berlin in 1919, which offered counseling and conducted the first sex change operations. These two events are correlated to the...
Oh, right. So and here's the pitch. The Nazis were the good guys because they were opposed to the sexual deviancy. Where were we? I think I had slogged through most of this. Here we are.
In 1919, which offered counseling and conducted the first sex change operations. These two events are correlated to the claims of anti-Semitism, not because of the degenerate ideology itself, but because the German sexologists also happened to be Jews.
They're Jews! Gotta pound that drum.
But what his influence helped to usher in was something more ambiguous, a cultural revolution that became the very fuel for a new phase of capitalism.
What? A new phase of capitalism? Suddenly it's capitalism's fault? Marcuse is not a capitalist. He was a postmodernist, which is a subdivision of being a Marxist. Even the French apologists, right? Derrida, Foucault, these people who would argue for actual pedophiles, they were Marxists. They're not capitalists, you lying turd. You have no shame. Oh, and you have no fear of God. That this is
Post-68 world did not see the collapse of capitalism. Instead, as Marxist philosopher Slavoj Žižek observes, it witnessed the birth of a new spirit of capitalism. The old, centralized structures of forced labor gave way to decentralized, flexible networks built on employee initiative.
Oh, so the people were getting more ability to improve their own lives, build their own companies, and this process helped solve world poverty or cut world poverty in more than a half in 40-year period. But no, that means it's the gays who are secretly the tools of the Jews. I mean, he's drawing connections he's not proving, and he's skipping over all the points that would disprove him because he's just a Nazi propaganda creep, which is why he's hiding his face and has been banned by Twitter.
Collaborative teams and self-realization. The rhetoric of 68, such as anti-authoritarianism, sexual liberation, decentralization, was not defeated by capitalism.
Decentralization The post-colonial movement in sub-Saharan Africa was rooted out of education in the Sorbonne, the most prestigious and most Marxist school in all of Paris and in all of France. Capitalism? Are you kidding me? Have you not studied any of the African revolutions, the post-colonial revolutions? Do you not know who was? All right, so the neo-Nazi Marxist types in the English-speaking world really love a country called Rhodesia, which was the only British colony when the Queen decided to decolonize, which I think was a mistake. It was an evil mistake driven by post-colonial Marxist ideas. One colony said no because every government that was being replaced was openly communist, was ethno-communist. Right? It wasn't just that they were made, consisted of minorities. It was actually that they were flat out open Soviet style Marxists, Marxist communists, and the with all the slaughter and all the poverty that was what the Rhodesians were really fighting against. And like the yes, in Rhodesia, the people, the whites held power, but the blacks had rights. And that goes away under Marxism to the point where you had black Rhodesians fighting for Rhodesia, and they were fighting against the Marxists. So even the cherry pick pet projects that the neo Nazis like are completely against the ideas of the Nazis. And the globalists are actual Marxists. They're not capitalists, but you're going to lie about that to make your point. You dishonest propaganda machine.
It was co-opted. The very institutions that the radicals of '68 sought to destroy, the factory, the school, and the family, were transformed. And as the left abandoned its structural critique of capitalism for the cultural politics of identity.
When was this? This flag's in 2010. There's nothing to do with the post-colonial era of the 1980s Africa. Are you kidding me? Have you studied the politics of American President Bill Clinton? He was against gay marriage. Barack Obama in 2011 was against gay marriage until he was in power, and then he flipped. This isn't a feature of a structural transformation of post 70s society. It's a figment of your imagination. Once again, you got to take something from 30 years and jump it back here so that you can pretend that there was a cause and effect.
Solidarity among the working class collapsed. Marcuse and the new
Solidarity among the working class. This guy, this narrator, can't figure out whether he's a Marxist or a fascist. And those two things hate each other because he's using Marxist talking points one breath and propping up fascism on the other, and then randomly saying, and it's all capitalism's fault because the gays and the Jews. This is such a tangled mess of this is schizophrenic. This isn't even coherent at
New
this
Left
point.
succeeded in displacing old structures, but not for socialism. In their place rose a hyper-adaptive, deregulated global capitalism, one that was not only unencumbered by tradition, but actively enriched by its destruction.
Actively enriched by its destruction? Prove it. You're not going to. That's a lie. All right, so unproven lie. Moving right along.
In the sexual revolution, capitalism found its perfect.
That political cartoons from the 1910s. Are you trying to do history here?
Perfect ally, which is declining birth rates, atomized individuals.
Declining birth rates are a side effect of industrialization. When you are living on a farm, children are free labor. When you're living in the city, children are really expensive pets. Now, I mean, economically, uh, his actual credentialed economists and historians who aren't afraid to show their face in public. Jordan Peterson. I can give a couple, if somebody wants more links in the comments, I can give you links for people from like the Naval War College. So how this worked was if you're living in a rural setting, you have one more child than you can stand. Right? Because you get like child 7 or child 14, So my mom was one of seven. Her mom was one of 14 kids. I'm one of seven kids. So one, it's not everybody, and two, it is has more to do with abandoning Christianity and urbanization than has anything else. Because you look at the populations that are actually producing, they're the religious ones. But urbanization, when you're in an urban setting, the motivation to have children is less. Um, and so the population goes down by industrialization, which leads to urbanization. So the more that you're living in a third world shithole, the more you have nothing to do but create more, crank out more babies. And as soon as that life changes, but that's okay. It's not a crisis. God's word says that God establishes times and seasons for all peoples and nations. And if a nation has an end, then the time is over. And if God doesn't want a nation to end, it's not going to end. There's panic mongering among people so popular right now. Take a breath, breathe. God's still in control. But no, right? You can't. I'm trying to manipulate people. I need to have them panicked. Oh my gosh, the birth rate's falling. We're all going to die. Well, yeah, we were all going to die anyway because we all sin, and the wages of sin is death. And wouldn't it be more important to tell people about Jesus? But nope, you're going to tell them about fascism and the evil Jews in your conspiracy theory. You tard.
Consumers whose identities were defined not by duty or heritage, but
Right. And here's again, fascists hate freedom. Ah, so how dare you? The fascist says, you in the street, your life should be defined by heritage, by your race, and the duties of your race. How dare you spend what you've earned through your wages to make your life better? You fiend! Evil shit. It's so bad.
by desire and choice and political correctness. Even anti-racism and post-nationalism, once the domain of radical critique, were absorbed into capitalism's global machine and
How? What?
turned into rigid political correctness.
Yeah, political correctness embraces those things. That's not a capitalist machine. Have you been able to link a single one of these thoughts to capitalism rather than just saying you're capitalist? Because if you have, I haven't caught it. We're almost done. You better up your game, Sparky, if you think you're going to win.
As national borders were broken down in the name of tolerance and openness, global capital found an abundant
Oh, so there's another crime against fascism. Because remember, the bold decision of fascism was sovereignty. So how dare you allow people to move from one land or another? Because this, and here's the particularly German idea of Germanic idea, because Norse countries, and then we got to allow Netherlands in too. Um, but the idea that of Volk und Land, right? The people in the land and the land of the people, and that these things are united, and you can't really be a Volk without connection to the land. And it's such a Germanic idea where you've lived in the same spot for thousands of years. You can't. It's not even an English idea, right? Because you can judge which group of invaders founded which town by what it's called here in the United Kingdom, right? If you go back to my people, then it's Pole or Pen or Tor, from the Celts. And if it was done by the Anglo Saxons, then it's got Ham, like Birmingham, right? And if it's done by the Normans, by the Viking invaders, then it was a burg. you know, and other endings. So only in the central German lands where there wasn't a lot of population migration, they have this kind of unique social view that to be of the people is to be of the land, and this is the Native Americans talk like this, but the Native Americans are so full of shit about it because you dig into their history and this land was there. A great example is the Sioux people claiming the Black Hills. Do you know how long the Sioux people lived in the Black Hills? 36 years. 36 years. That's why it's their ancestral lands for all time. And how did the American Sioux Indians get the Black Hills? They violated a treaty and militarily conquered it away from the people from the tribe that they had the treaty of, and drove them off, which is why when the American cavalry wanted scouts to go fight the Sioux, other tribes were like, "Oh yeah, we'll help you fight those dicks." Yep, we're totally down with that struggle. Uh, so you very uniquely you have to go. I'd say some in Korea, some in Korea, even most of India. Like South Central and Southern India, maybe. And then the German Highlands is the only places in the world where populations haven't washed back and forth. So they have kind of a uniquely strong idea of the people and the land and your ethnicity and your duty to your heritage. That is such an excuse for the Nazis to be evil, conquering, murdering, raping pieces of dog do. That so when I hear an American say it, and when I hear an American who's sporting an Iron Cross, and pumping, not, and now he's not saying Nazi. No, because that would trigger a Twitter algorithm. That would trigger an algorithm strike, right? Right. He would be shadow banned or downgraded. But he's using the Nazi propaganda points. He's whitewashing World War II fascism. He's twisting structures to make it fascist. I'm gonna have to put a disclaimer on this because Nazis piss me off so much that the grown-up language comes out.
Abundant supply of cheap labor, undermining native working classes and reshaping demographics in a way that
Undermining native working classes, right? There's the Falkland. Um, okay. Native working class. My Celtic grandfather was an illegal immigrant fleeing from World War One. Did my white hiney did my white hiney undermine the native working classes? When white Americans feel like settlers, hey, where did the white Americans come from? Was it Europe? Geneticists are even saying that the Native Americans, starting to look like the Native Americans, only came in around 300 BC, and they replaced the people. They completely replaced, aka wiped out, and there's no trace of, if the humans who lived here before them. So the Native Americans genocided the heck out of the pre-American Indians. Um, and that's the life, man. You can't possibly go the native workers when white Americans feel like outsiders. Oh yeah, pound that racial essentialism. Because to the Nazi mind, America is not a set of ideals or morals, which is actually more in tune with the biblical vocabulary. So in the Bible, the idea, the word typically used in Greek for nation is ethnos, which is a derivative of ethos, right? They share an ethos. They share a worldview. They share like a religion and a language. This has nothing to do with it. You have African Roman citizens who had skin as black as night, and they spoke Latin and they could quote Cicero. They were Romans, and that was the world back then. But okay, so propaganda boy has now moved over to race.
permanently fractured communal bonds. As the prominent anti-racist, sex equalist, pro-immigration, Jewish philosopher Noam Chomsky
Noam Chomsky was a communist activist. This isn't. All of your examples, one, prove that you're a schmuck, and two, undermine your very thesis that liberals were the secret weapon of capitalism because you keep putting out, put out communist Jews. The problem is, I grew up in a population that had a large Jewish minority. For every communist who happens to be Jewish proves a conspiracy. I could walk 2 miles, talk to my friend Richard Sugarman, whose parents were upper middle class. He ended up becoming a biochemical engineer for I want to say for the Air Force. It was the Air Force or the Navy. That's not a capitalist. These are not representative of the populations. You're cherry picking to stir up racial hate because you're just a propagandist piece of shit.
Said in his book, The Common Good. The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. This was the bargain. The left received its liberation, its iconoclasm, its new morality. Capitalism received a pliant, cultureless consumer.
No, there was no bargain. The people you're citing hate capitalism. They denounce it in the streets. They advocate for socialism. You're lying.
Disloyal to people, indifferent to place, and utterly lacking.
Right, disloyal to people, indifferent to place. Right, there's the Germanic by way of fascist, Völkerland again. Once you know what to listen for to sort out Nazis, it's not hard to find. And no wonder this worm has to hide himself.
Any belief system in conflict with the logic of the market. As Marx and Engels noted in the Communist Manifesto, the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby the relations of production and with them the whole relations of society.
They're wrong, but for somebody, what side are you on? This is so schizophrenic, right? I'm going to quote Marx. I'm going to quote Marx. I'm going to quote Marx. I'm going to praise fascists. I'm going to praise fascists. I'm going to praise fascists. I feel like the sides of your brain, they should be fighting in the middle of your skull, man. I actually think you're a high school kid, too stupid to even understand the consequences of the things you're quote mining.
The eternal revolution of the market has no need of tradition.
The eternal revolution of the market has no. Oh, talks like this.
Thrives precisely by demolishing every last vestige of order. In the end, the left believed it was destroying capitalism. But what it destroyed was everything.
Wait, you just admitted to yourself the left, the left, so the Marxists, they're against capitalism. You just admitted it within a minute of saying that it was an alliance, a secret alliance.
That once stood in capitalism's way. This, then, is the final irony of the Revolution of '68, is that what began as a revolt against capitalist oppression became the very engine of capitalism's transformation.
Prove it. You haven't. You cannot show me a way in which gay liberation theology has produced any significant increase in income. You haven't linked post-colonial thought with increased market share or productivity or increase of GDP. The only thing you've been able to bitch to me about in this entire time is they're betraying their race and their nation. So if I'm not a Nazi, I don't care, and you're not making any points. But you're trying to put this together like a propaganda video. And moron, I hate to break it to you, propaganda is supposed to convince people who don't already believe everything you believe. Now, maybe all 15 people that who believe your little fringe beliefs and haven't, and have managed to keep enough jobs to keep the internet on are going to click like. But sucker, you're not going to convince anybody who's thought or has an education, because this is like listening to an over-caffeinated 16-year-old bang big words together because he's read some apologists and now he thinks he can make coherent thoughts, but you're failing at it.
And triumph. The new spirit of capitalism.
Okay, it's an AI picture, but you're not proving anything. The new spirit of capitalism, but you just said that the new spirit of capitalism was a quote from the 1820s. How is that a new spirit of capitalism?
Far from being defeated, cannibalized the egalitarian and anti-hierarchical rhetoric of the new left.
I think you're using words that you don't know what they mean.
And rebranded itself as a libertarian liberation.
So you've got Pride Month things, and that somehow makes it. Okay. Moron. Companies that make a profit by interacting with the free market are risk averse. So they will pander to the loudest, aka most risky faction of their society. Because if those people get upset, they're never going to hear the end of it. That's it. That's it. It's not a conspiracy. And as soon as it wasn't profitable, right? As soon as Bud Light did their, as soon as here in America, Bud Light did Dylan Mulvaney, a famous pathetically fake trans person, attention seeker, when they used him as a marketing tool, they lost their position as the number one selling beer in America. They've never gotten it back, and company after company, America is looking at that and going, we don't want to lose our market share. We don't want to lose our profits. We're going to step back from this constant pro gay stuff. But you don't study market trends, you don't study politics, and you obviously don't study recent history. All right, I'm almost done with you, you schmuck.
From all forms of traditional domination, corporate,
Liberation from all forms of traditional domination.
familial, educational. The New Left, in defeating the visible structures of post-war capitalism, made room for something even more efficient, more
in defeating the visible structures of post-war capitalism? I'm pretty sure that church and family existed at the height of feudalism. Let me double check. I'm pretty sure that religious structures and families existed in the Neolithic era, and we've got proof. You're so full of shit, you ignorant child.
invasive, more totalizing. Postmodern capitalism, nimble, global, and unconstrained by borders or morals, has invaded every sphere of life once guarded by tradition or the state.
Did you hear it again? Right? Here's the Nazi framework. Borders and morals. Right? Because what is morals? Morals are borders. Morals are nationalism. Morals are Volk und Land. Volk und Land, Volk und Land, Volk und Land. Never stops. It's his only moral. It's his only thought.
State. From healthcare and education to security and sexuality itself. In place of worker solidarity, we now have individualized grievance politics.
Worker solidarity? When the redacted did we have worker solidarity? Oh, right. The German National Socialist Workers' Party, right? When we were all united. So this is fascism, right? This solidarity. Why don't have solidarity? So fascisti, it's an Italian term, in case you're not familiar, of a bundle of sticks. And the idea is you're not really an individual, you're part of a nation. And the nation is basically one body, all put together, a bundle of sticks strong with one leader. And the leader is the head of the body and he defines it. Hitler, Mussolini. So what we have is 14, 16-year-old ignorant, ignorant child putting a bad propaganda video together, endlessly butthurt that ethno-nationalism and fascism aren't still in control, who doesn't understand economics, who doesn't understand understand politics, who has a real hard time keeping a timeline together because he doesn't even know what comes first and what caused what because he keeps screwing it up to make his points.
In place of birth rates and continuity, we have declining population.
In place of continuity. Can you show me a Bible verse where continuity is a value? Let me try to look that up. Let me do a Bible search, a Bible gateway search for continuity. Nope. Oh, no. That's not a Christian value. That's a Nazi value. And I don't give a shit whether it exists or not. All right, let me move this again. Forecast. N8 non-white, non-Hispanic whites only. Population growth? So by 2050, you're projecting the populations will be down. Okay. The traditional carrying capacity of the Earth before the explosion with the Industrial Revolution was 1 billion. We're still at 7 times that, bro. It's not like the end of life, but it is a but if your view of reality is centered on mein Race, mein Volk und mein Land, then yeah, okay. You know, my traditional homeland no longer speaks our traditional language of Kernuic. Some people know it. They're teaching it again to kids because it can be regained. But that's how that's how the cookie crumbles. That's history. It's not a crime.
Populations and cultural amnesia. In place of class struggle, we have identity consumption.
Oh no, they're black and they're I don't know. They're painted black. They're not kissing. They're not fornicating. Are they about to dance? Like I've seen square dances that get about that close. What am I supposed to be upset again? Again, I'm not a racist, so if you expect me to be upset that there's a black person in a picture, go jump off a cliff.
The result is a world in which capitalism has no exterior.
What does that even mean? That's word salad. That's capitalism has no exterior. Was capitalism a house?
The market has become the medium of life itself.
People live by earning and purchasing things. Yes, we no longer grow all of our own food in our backyard while 50% of our children die before the age of 2 because primitive life didn't have health care.
What was once rebellion has become reinforcement.
It's got nothing to do with capitalism.
What was once transgression has become transaction.
What? What is that from? Der Stürmer? I've never. You're saying that capitalists paid for Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter ended up being a Ponzi scheme run by black folks to take money from black folks. Capitalism? What?
Through the useful idiots and cynical opportunists of the new
Oh, must get back to the Jewish conspiracy pictures.
left, the capitalist class found a way to revolutionize production once again, this time not through steam or assembly lines.
Capitalism? You're giving. What is this supposed to be? That's a Soviet propaganda picture from inside the Iron Curtain, right? The CCCP. That's the Communist Party in actual communist countries during the Cold War, and you're saying that's a picture of of capitalism reframing something? You're so stupid.
But through the demolition of every boundary that might hinder total commodification. What Marx and Engels described in the Communist Manifesto, the ceaseless revolutionizing of production, the relentless agitation of social conditions.
Are you against them or for them? Because you sure like to quote them. You keep throwing propaganda boy keeps throwing up pictures of destroyed churches, but see, I haven't heard him dig into scripture at all ever. I mean, he quotes Marx way more than he quotes Jesus, which is none.
Has reached its zenith. The bourgeois is now characterized not only by
Bourgeois. Bourgeois? What are you speaking? Bourgeois? Bourgeoisie, if you need to murder it in America? Bourgeois. I love this.
certainty and upheaval, but by the pacification of those it exploits.
You have a cell phone. Ha! Therefore, you must be. Why are you showing me somebody in bed? Honestly, this is a creep. The sexual obsession of this is also really creepy.
Wealth flows upward at unprecedented rates.
Wealth flows upwards. The rich get richer. Yeah, as prophesied. Also, in the free market, as opposed to everywhere else, most other systems, the only way for somebody to become richer is to enrich the lives of others so that they will pay him more, right? So the more wealth is generated that can only be generated in a free market society by creating goods and services that improve the lives of others. So the people your lives are whose lives you're improving will look at you and go, "Wow, that will make my life better. Please take the wages that I have earned through my labor." The exchange of capital for an improved life. The horror. This. So we've got some 14-year-old man child writing a bad propaganda piece, so brainwashed by a communist application and trying desperately to be desperately to talk Nazi, to convince people to be a Nazi, like he's decided he's suddenly to be a Nazi without using the word, because he's just going to twist vocabulary to champion the bold and determined fascists. um Oh, what a piece of God. Okay, so this video was a thing that
Cultures
happened.
dissolve into content.
Cultures dissolve into content. Yeah, so here's that Volk thing, right? Oh no, they won't speak my grandfather didn't speak Cornish as his first language, therefore he wasn't really Cornish, even though he grew up in the same house where his family had been, leasing, etc., from the crown since the dawn of time on the land where they've lived since the prehistoric era. But they don't speak Cornish.
Placated by material comfort, cheap goods, and a hypersexualized culture masquerading.
Oh, it's a rave. It's a rave. Surely they're all going to masturbate afterwards. Hypersexualized. Buddy, I've read Anglo-Saxon literature from the 8th century, right? Like, do you think we're oversexed? Ooh, tell me you're ignorant, or the French chanson de geste that the French nobility would tell each other, the songs of great deeds in French. The French nobility were telling each other during the height of the Middle Ages. Yeah, we got nothing on classical literature. You can read Virgil's Aeneid about the founding of Rome, and there's a scene when they finally land on Italy where they have games, and they have like Olympic games to celebrate to the gods. And there's this pederastic couple, right? This statutory rape, child molestation couple. The entire party, all of Rome, all the future Romans sit by and go, "They're such a beautiful couple. Isn't it wonderful that they're part of us?" I mean, I can keep going back to the dawn of time. People are still sinners. It's not the end of the world, and because I know that, you have no power to manipulate me. With your subtle hints that fascist collectivism is the way to
As
go.
freedom. The New Left believed it was
Masquerading as freedom, buddy. Since the fall of the Cold War, since the end of the Cold War, the free market, this capitalism that is freedom, has almost wiped out global illiteracy, right? When I was born in the 1970s, if I could read, I was more privileged than 80% of the world, and that has flipped, and now it's only about 20% of the world that can't read. In 20 years, from 2000, so from 1995 to 2015, poverty in the world was cut by half. International trade, international travel, better access to education, better access to medicine. There is no measure of freedom which has not increased under capitalism. Sorry that your Marxist school teachers and your secret closet Nazi buddies, both of whom just want control, haven't told you the truth. But the free market capitalism happens to be the best thing for everyone alive, as proved by the last 100 years of history.
It was burying capitalism. But in truth, it made indestructible.
Okay, I suffered through that, and that's a thing that I did. I'm done. I'm going to go do something productive with my life.